My name is Giannis Banks. I am the Texas NAACP Young Adult Chair, and I will be talking to you today about redistricting. Why it's important, why do you need to participate, and just giving you some solid information about the redistricting process and why it's done. And lately, you've been hearing about the census and how important this filling out the census is because of how it allocates resources to our communities, whether it's funding for public education or how they know where to build different hospitals or number of hospitals or schools, things of that nature, and also how much funding you're able to get from the federal government by seeing the numbers, the population of people that are living in your community. So I'll start off with some of the basics with redistricting principles. When you're looking at drawing redistricting maps or the maps are being drawn, kind of things you want to look for is to use geographic boundaries as district boundaries, meaning if there's counties here in Texas, when it comes to your state legislature, we have what is called the county line rule, meaning that if you can draw house districts wholly contained within a county, you should. You shouldn't go outside that county when drawing those districts. If there's rivers or cities that you can use as well to kind of help shape those districts, those are also good things to use when drawing districts to kind of make it a natural kind of fit. If it ever gets to the courts do like you to keep political subdivisions, which are your counties, cities, wards, voting precincts, keep them together. That's something that the courts will look hard into. They don't want to see that being split too much because it's never a good look when you have neighbors in a city that can possibly be split. When you look at some of your larger voting precincts, when it comes to city council, when it comes to your congressional or even your state house seats or even your state senator, it's something they look at to see, okay, could the city be within this district? You want to try to keep that together. For me, when I draw maps, I try to keep it based to the existing plan as much as possible. When you're drawing these district boundaries, you don't want to get too creative and completely coming in butchering up districts, because that shows that you're trying to do something or that you may have a motive. So if you can keep these districts looking somewhat similar to what they currently are, that's going to be helpful. And it's an easier way to do it. You want to have equal population size when you're creating your districts, and particularly when you're looking at congressional districts, the differential of your district sizes really have to be equal. When you figure out your number of how big your congressional district needs to be, it needs to hit that number for the most part. I think if it gets to court, they will give you a little bit of leeway where you may be one under or one over, but not too much. When it comes to your house districts here in Texas, you do have some standard deviation where you can have plus minus 10 when it comes to having different population sizes. So you want your districts to be compact and contiguous, and we'll have a whole bunch of definitions coming up later on in the presentation. But compact, you want it to be as tight as possible, basically, and contiguous, you want it to be all connected. You don't want to have a district that's split apart, or you can't have a district that's split apart and something cuts right through it. It needs to be touching at all points. And you want to avoid vote dilution. You want to make sure these voices are being counted. You are taken away from a district. It doesn't need to be too small, especially when you're looking, or too large when you're looking at the population size of the different groups. If you had a population of, say, 61% Hispanic and Black in a district, you don't want to cut it down to 31% Hispanic and Black in the population. That's showing vote dilution, and that you're trying to weaken the vote and the voices of those individuals. As I mentioned, here's some important terms for you to know. Coalition district. These are the districts where you look to have combined racial minorities, as I had just mentioned, forming up the majority of the population, and they're able to vote the candidate of their choice, as well as working along with, say, the majority population, and you're able to get the candidate of your choice. We have a few coalition districts throughout the state of Texas, and I'll show you some a little later on. Community of interest. That's exactly what that sounds like. You have a group of individuals who have a common good, with policy concerns or what have you, that could benefit that district. It could be that y'all all are concerned about If you're looking at a city level, it could be about zoning. It could be about education. It could be about policing. You find out that you have a group of common interests, no matter what your background is. And so that's something that you look for when you're drawing the maps as well. Are you having these community of interest? If you're rural, you kind of tend to have your district where you want to have rural individuals together. Rural and urban have different concerns. So that would not be a community of interest. So you want to kind of keep it together where you have those communities of interest close together. It's something that the courts look for, but as well as you're submitting maps to whichever elected body, they look to make sure that these community of interest are together. As I mentioned earlier, compactness. The one thing the courts would say is that there's no true definition of compactness, but they know it when they see it. Now, the redistricting software that you may use can show you or give you a compactness score to try to give you an idea, but you can look at a district and see, is it tight together? Is it very far spread out? If it's spread out, why is it spread out? But you want your districts to be as compact as possible and not running way across from one side to the other because you're trying to grab population. You want it to be tight, nice district. Contiguity, we talked about that. Again, that's just where all areas of the district are physically connected to each other. You have those shapes. Cracking. This is something that you will hear about a lot when it comes to redistricting. It's one of the ways they try to impact negatively a district. And that's when you split the racial minority community into two or more districts so that minority does not have make up a significant portion of that district. It will weaken their voice, their vote. So if you have a district that could make 50% plus one, which would now make it a protected district, but instead they crack it down or divide it into, or they spread it out so that minority group does not have that voice, that representation. That's called cracking, because they don't want them to have that voice. And that can be obvious when you look at an area and say, hey, man, you could have drawn a whole minority district here where their voices could be heard. But instead you sent them in 3, 4, 5 different districts, 2 districts, what have you, when they could have formed one district. Again, the opportunity district, racial minorities are able to elect a candidate of their choice. Gerrymandering is a word you hear a lot and people throw around a lot. And that's when you draw those lines to give a group an unfair advantage over another. Gerrymandering is not the same as redistricting, but gerrymandering can occur during redistricting. So you'll see that where one of the ones that is illegal, of course, is racial gerrymandering. And that is when it adds into cracking, and you'll see packing as well in a couple of minutes. But when you're trying to split up those minority groups, those racial minority groups, to weaken their vote, you gerrymander them so they can't have that voice that they should have. And that has been, outlawed. Packing, again, is when you put too many into a district where you say, well, I wanted to make sure this district, this racial minority, what have you, is represented in this district. So you may have it a high 90%, a high 80% makeup of the district. But when you look at it, you could have split that one and created 2 districts. So you have 2 voting power. You increase the voting power by 2. And you have 2 opportunities for that minority opportunity district. Instead of having one representation, like I said, you have 2 of them. So you've seen that occur as well. And they'll try to spin it as, well, we want to make sure make sure this is a safe district and they can elect their candidate of choice. Well, yeah, you could have had 2 candidates instead of 1. And that has happened throughout the time as well, here in Texas and other places where they have packed the district. So you have to look out for that. And of course, packing is, you look at the data to see, okay, is this packing or not? I mean, there's going to be parts of Texas, especially in the Valley, where you will have, when it comes to the Hispanic population, you will have that population represented in the high 90s, high 80s. And there is nothing you can do about it because of that area and how those districts are drawn. That's just what that makeup is going to be. So there's times like that where that's not packing. That's just what the numbers are and the population is. But you can look at somewhere like Harris County and see if they're trying to pack all of this racial minority into one district or not. And it's always good to look at that because, again, that can help increase the voting power that you have and that voice you have. Reapportionment, that happens when the census is done and you get your new population for the country. For when it comes to U.S. House of Representatives, that is a set number. So, of course, you have to look, those numbers of state representatives will change based off of the number of population that is in your state. I think it's important to remember that, your state Senate seats, everybody is going to get two, so that doesn't change. But based on the growth of the population in your state, you could gain or lose seats in the House of Representatives. Texas gained, I believe, 4 this past redistricting cycle. Actually, I think it was 3 this past redistricting cycle and 4 the previous redistricting cycle due to the population growth. And what that means is that other places, other states had to lose seats in the House of Representatives. And as population moves around the country, that will happen. That's why we do redistricting, or we do the census every 10 years to see where people are living, to make sure that representation is being done in Congress when it comes to the House of Representatives. But so redistricting, again, is where you will hear a lot. It's the process used by governments to redraw political districts boundaries, and applies to all levels of government where district elections are held. So county, state, state senators, state reps, U.S. Congress, county commissioners, city council, judges as well, where you look at how these districts are drawn. If you are drawing districts, it will have some redistricting will have to be done. School board is another one. So, and we use the census to figure out that information. So that's another valuable reason why we do the census, is to make sure that your voices are being heard and being heard equally and properly. When it comes to drawing these districts, the districts must have equal or nearly equal populations. Again, you can figure out that number, and that can be a whole other conversation when it comes down to drawing the maps. We can talk about, but the districts must have equal or nearly equal number. That's where I talked about your congressional districts. They pretty much got to be equal what the proper size of a congressional district is done. And you've done that by, you have your population of your state. You divide it by the number of congressional seats you have, and then you will have the population size of your congressional district, and that's what you need to hit. And similar when it comes to Texas, your Texas House district and your Senate districts, you take that population divided by the number of state Senate districts, or divided by the number of state House district, and you get the population size of those districts. But again, when it comes to the state House and state Senate, there is some flexibility in population numbers, but you don't want it to be too far off. It also shows that you are probably up to no good when it comes to drawing your districts. You want to try to keep them as close as possible. And you can see that there from the Constitution, where it says district must be drawn in a manner that neither has the purpose nor will have the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on the basis of race, color, or language group. Again, that's from the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, 15th Amendment of the Voting Rights Act 1965, and of course, Congressional Districts, Section 2, Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. So this is something that you have advocacy groups as well as the courts looking out for, to make sure that the voting rights of trying to weaken their voting block. Now, here's some significant court cases that when it does get to the courts, these are some things that the courts are looking for. And even as folks, before it gets to the court, these are things that map drawers keep in mind, because they realize that this is what the courts, again, will look for. So Jingles, this is Thornsburg versus Jingles. That happened back in 1986. This is the standard for determining whether a majority district has to be drawn because of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. These are things that it must show if you're going to have somebody make an argument for the district to be drawn. There's a racial, language minority group is sufficiently numerous and compact to form a majority in a single member district. The minority group is politically cohesive. Again, as I said earlier, it tends to vote similarly. You can look at election history to see how these groups have voted and see if they form a voting bloc where they typically vote the same way. And it shows that, they should have their voice heard. And the majority votes sufficiently as a bloc to enable it to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. Again, so this shows that where they should be able to elect their candidate of choice, but you are having folks blocking their voice, but their population is now being shown that they should be able to voice their opinion. It shows that, okay, yeah, you need to have a Section 2 district drawn there. Here's Shaw versus Reno, 1993. The districts that violate the Equal Protection Clause will be struck down by the courts if drawn strictly based off of race. So you can't sit there and just go off of race and say, I'm drawing this. This is, you look for naturally occurring districts that you can make happen, where you're not just out there chasing a population to form these districts. This is saying that it needs to be basically naturally occurring when you draw these districts, and it still can be compact and cohesive. Again, those are words you will hear a lot when forming that district. And here's a recent one, because I think a lot of times when you hear about redistricting, you think, well, that was happening way back when, right? No, it's still happening now. And here's a recent case with Cooper v. Harris. This established that partisanship cannot be used to justify racial gerrymandering. So what you were seeing over in North Carolina is that you had some districts drawn, and they tried to say, well, it wasn't because of racial gerrymandering, but it was partisanship, which you can do partisanship gerrymandering, but they tried to have it in a way as the Republican Party versus basically some of the Democrats there, particularly the Black and brown population. It's like, well, it just so happened that they were Black and brown that we are hurting their voting, doing a vote dilution. But the courts realized that, no, you cannot harm this Black and brown community by saying, well, we're not doing it based off race. We're trying to do it legally through partisanship, but you are impacting the racial subgroups. So that was leading to racial gerrymandering, and it struck that down, which was a very important case, because I think, if the courts didn't rule that way, you could see a lot of districts going away, and they're saying, well, it's not because you're Black or brown. We won't harm you because of that. It was political, and which is, of course, legal to do that based off politics, but you can't do that at the harm of hurting a minority group. This is a picture that y'all have probably seen many times in your history books. This is the original gerrymander districts. And as you can see, it looks like a snake or a dragon with wings, but this is drawn, and you can see how these are not compact districts, how it is stretching all the way around, and it was drawn to hurt again, minority vote. And this is what the original map that was done for that. Here's an example of partisan gerrymandering. And this is looking over in the 2010-2020 Travis County here in Texas. And what you're seeing here is was the congressional districts that were drawn. And at the time, Travis County was pretty much the perfect size for a congressional district, where you could draw a congressional district wholly contained in Travis County. But what the legislature did was they brought in 5 different congressional districts into Travis County, so that the citizens in Travis County, in particular Austin, would not have, their voice wouldn't be as strong, and the district, it wouldn't have a district anchored within Travis County. And when you hear somebody say your district is not anchored within a place, it just means that the majority of the votes are coming from that area. And so the goal was to take away a voice from Travis County by having 5 different districts coming in and pulling out parts of Travis, parts of Austin, so you wouldn't have that candidate representing the capital of Texas. And that was done in 2010-2020. Here is North Carolina, and you can see this racial gerrymandering that was done there for District 12, where they packed in African-American voters. And this, again, was back in the 2010 to 2020 time, which went to the courts, and the court struck that down, where they saw how they were trying to pack in all of the African-American vote, a large number of African-American voters into that district. Here is Illinois' Congressional District 4, 2004. This packs 2 Hispanic areas. You could have had 2 Hispanic districts drawn from there, but as you can see, that is not compact district that is being shown there, because they were trying to just grab all of the Hispanic population they could and put it into this one district, instead of drawing 2 districts and allowing them to have 2 voices to be heard into Congress. Here's another example from 2011 redistricting, which I was heavily involved, I should mention, in that case, where I was the map drawer. They had packed minority populations. They packed them and cracked them so well that they were saying, no, we couldn't draw a new district within the DFW area, and we showed them otherwise. Now, they didn't pick the map I drew, but the end result, there was a new minority opportunity district that was drawn in the DFW area because the population said it so. I think it's important to recognize that when Texas gained those 4 congressional districts back in 2011, it was based off the population growth of the Black, brown, and Asian communities as well. That's the population that was coming to Texas, but Texas was not trying to draw any districts that were reflective of that growth. They was kind of saying, thank you for the population, thank you for the 4 new congressional district and voting power, but we don't want it to be reflective of who's moving to the state, so we're not going to do that. And that was argued in the court, and the courts agreed that, yes, there should have been a congressional district drawn there. So, and part of that process, the San Antonio District Court created CD33 as a minority opportunity district that came from that 2011 lawsuit, which is, I think the district is still, I'm sorry, this is what now is still there. And Representative Vesey is in that district where they realized that, yes, a minority opportunity should be drawn in the DFW area based off that population and the packing and cracking that was done trying to form those other districts. This is something that was done back in 2003 by the Texas NAACP. And let me just say, when it comes to redistricting, one of the mantras is that there are no friends when it comes to redistricting. You have seen Democrat go after Democrat, Republican go after Republican when it comes to redistricting. And we have challenged both parties. The Texas NAACP has when it comes to redistricting. And in 23, this was a challenge that was done to the Democrats, where Congressional District 9, which is there now and is represented by Congressman Al Green. It was a minority opportunity district that should have been drawn, and the Texas Democratic Party did not want to at the time, so that had to go to court. And through those efforts, that district was created to have minority voice population represented there, and that came Congressional District 9, which is, again, currently represented by Congressman Al Green. When this district was drawn, he ran, and he's been representing the district since it was drawn. This is shown 2011 to 2020. Texas House District 46 is just another opportunity example of our minority opportunity district. It has shifted a little bit since the new redistricting cycle, but again, it's showing how you can put together Black and brown population together, and they have a community interest, and they vote together, and so that they can elect their candidate of choice. And this is in Austin, Texas. And this is just showing some retrogression that occurred back in 2012. When you look at Senate District 10, that was a district it's currently a swing district here in Texas. At the time, and Wendy Davis had won that seat, and they didn't see it as a swing district when it happened. They thought it would have been a Republican district, but she proved otherwise because she formed a coalition of communities of interest who had like-minded, voting issues, and she went out and worked the community and talked to them and expressed their issues, and so she was there to represent their vote. And what happened is that those in the Texas legislature did not like the fact that that district didn't vote Republican like they wanted, so they tried to split and retrogress that minority population that was in District 10. They split them down the middle, basically, so you can split the Black and brown away from each other, and now have a district that would not be representing their issues and their concern. And so they did have a deal was made in the Texas Senate due to the court ruling, of course, that said that it should, what they did is return it back to its original shape. And you can see the difference between the 10 that was drawn and the 10 that it originally was. And so it went back to that shape so that coalition of groups can continue to work together. Because what had happened was even part of those who were in District 10, as you can see, 22 kind of creeps into the District 10 on the left. That 22 took that very urban area and pulled them into rural Texas, the district being anchored in rural Texas. So, of course, their voice would not be really heard in the Texas Senate because the voting numbers are higher in the rural area, that would be higher there. So, it showed that they would be lacking in their voice, and the courts realized that, and a deal was made. One thing that is important to note that when it comes to Texas and our Black population, we have the largest Black population in the U.S. We're, after recent census data, we're now up to 4.3 million people. Harris County has the second largest Black population of all counties in the United States. And the thing that we have to look at is what becomes of this growth and how does that translate to political power? Again, not just at the state level, but the local level, as we continue to look forward to the next redistricting cycle. Where does these voices, where are they, and how can those voices be heard? And we continue to increase political power for the Black population to make sure that our issues are not ignored or pushed to the side. The population is growing in the state, and we need to show what that is. Now, the question you may be asking, okay, so what does this? Why is this important to me? And why should I care when it comes to redistricting? Well, it is still happening. Even just recently, a few weeks ago, down in Galveston County, federal court ruled that the commissioner map there was denying Blacks and Hispanics equal voting rights. It was precinct 3, as you can see. It went from 61% Black and brown down to 31% Black and brown. The lawsuit brought forth together by NAACP, LULAC, and others back in 2022. It showed that they did not want to have that minority voice that had been there for a while now. They wanted to get rid of that district where their voices would not be heard. And it took it to the courts, and the courts looked at it, and this was not a liberal judge. The judge of this case was appointed by then President Trump, who looked at this and said, yeah, this is not right. When you split a district like that, as we talked about, remember packing and cracking, you crack this district like that, where your population pretty much, you cut it in half of the representation of the Black and brown there in that district. It was unnecessary. So the court has ruled that a remedy district needs to be drawn. This is going to be a case to watch. I know that down there in Galveston County, the county judge there has said that they're going to appeal to the Fifth Circuit for their ruling. And it's a great chance that this case is going to end up at the Supreme Court. Of course, depending on what the Fifth Circuit does, well, yeah, it's going to end up at the Supreme Court. So this is going to be one to watch because, again, this is happening now. This isn't what's happened back in the 1960s or the 50s or the 40s or the 70s. This is happening now. And Texas has a history of not necessarily doing right by people of color when it comes to redistricting. I don't think there's been a redistricting cycle since the implementation of the Voting Rights Act where Texas has not had lawsuits come forward based off of redistricting. And that's whoever's been in power, whichever political party. And everybody looks at the state level because that's, the one that's high up there. But here you are at a county level showing how this can impact county. And it's the same for cities. Again, it's the same for your state board of education. You want to pay attention to make sure that your voices are not being diluted through this process. Because once it's done, that's 10 years before change can happen. And there's a lot that can happen in those 10 years that can hurt you detrimentally. Or if you look at the other way, there's a lot that could be done to help you in a positive way if the districts are drawn right. So you want to stay involved. You want to stay engaged. You want to make sure you're participating and seeing what's going on. And another case to keep an eye on, which has been resolved. This happened in Alabama. It was Allen v. Milligan. Now, there was a 5-4 Supreme Court decision that came down that reaffirmed the Voting Rights Act protections that said that, yes, there should have been an additional Black district drawn in Alabama. This is, of course, done by the legislature. They drew the maps and didn't want to create that seat. It made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, yeah, man, no, there should be 2 Black districts there in Alabama. You need to draw another one. As with any redistricting case, the state or whatever entity, whichever governmental body does have the right to first rectify that issue before it's taken to an outside party. So they went back to Alabama legislature and said, hey, y'all need to fix this. Alabama legislature said, no, we ain't going to do it. We're going to do it our way, like we said, and resubmitted maps that did not draw a new Black district, House Congressional District, House Representative District there in Alabama. That's pretty bold to basically ignore what the Supreme Court has said, whether we agree with their ruling or decision or not. What they say is what that law is, right? What they say is what it is. That's how we are set up. And they decided that they did not like that ruling, so we're not going to do it. So they resubmitted it. basically it's the same map or a map that does not increase the black voting strength. Supreme Court said, yeah, or it went to the district court there, I'm sorry. And the district court said, yeah, clearly y'all are not listening. The ruling said that you need to draw a new black district. But hey, we gave you a chance to rectify. No problem. We're going to take care of this. And so a new map has been done that has a new black district there in Alabama. But again, when you ask, why is this important? Why should I be engaged? Why should I be involved? Here you are, the Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, saying this needs to be done. And you have this legislature in Alabama saying, no, we don't want to listen. Don't care who it hurts. This is what we want. This is what we want to do. And so, with that, that's just kind of a real high level explanation about the redistricting process. I'm always happy to talk more about it. You can get a lot deeper into the process. There are definitely groups who are involved with this battle, and it's going to be a battle every. I used to think it would happen every 10 years, but there's a redistricting lawsuit here in Texas dealing with the congressional and state house maps and state Senate maps as well that were drawn in 2021. That lawsuit is ongoing, and it will be happening in El Paso next year. Probably about springtime is when the case should be happening. They're waiting for a date to come down. And again, the last redistricting cases I was involved in, it went from 2011 to 2018. And it just shows how that works and how that process works. So it's important to be engaged. It's important to be involved. These organizations, they need individuals on the ground in the community that can help explain what's happening and that can be representative of what's happening in that community. Because it's hard for outside groups, whether it's the lawyer committee or the NAACP or LULAC, especially if they don't have chapters there. They need help with finding people to say, hey, I live in this town, in this county, in this city, and here's what's happening to us, and we need somebody to help come defend us because our voting strength is being taken away. Our voice is being taken away, and I don't want to lose my voice. So I need some help for somebody to come and represent me, and that's the kind of work that they do. So, it's important to understand how this process works because of how it impacts you when you look at what is done in your different bodies of government: county commissioner, city council, state house, state senate, Congress, school board, anything again that has a district that has to be redrawn. It's going to impact how that looks. So we want you to be engaged. We want you to be informed. We want you to ask questions. I think that's the important thing, is encouraging these institutions to do a better job of teaching redistricting, teaching about the census, not just kind of gloss over it, because there is so much power within these districts and how they're being drawn that it's not being done justice with how it's being taught in school. You have so much strength behind that, and it controls money as well. When you look at your government levels, I mean, these are the people who are deciding what is being done with your tax dollars, and that has a very big impact on you as well. So, be engaged, be informed, reach out to different groups to see how you can help them, but just also know what's happening. And don't let it get lost in all the other noise you're going to hear about. It's not the most exciting topic there is, but it is one of the most important things that can happen. And again, there's just so much more information we can dive into about redistricting and how that works for the parties and government, and how they would use that to weaken your voice, to weaken your vote. And we may not even realize it half the time because they know it's not something we're paying attention to. But this is at its core how you make up our democracy, because this is about voting and your representation. And so you want to make sure you're equally represented. You want to make sure your voice is heard. You got to be involved in the redistricting process and see what they are doing and how you can help make a difference, and let them know you can't just do what you've been doing anymore. We are watching. We are paying attention. They have to give you an opportunity to testify on these maps, depending on the level that you go. The Texas legislature, they have software that you can use to draw your own maps. And there's some software you can get for free where if you want to try to draw your own maps, you can. And each of these processes, they have to be allowed, they have to allow citizens to show maps of what they can do as well. And so if you really get into it, you can draw your own maps and say, this is how I think this should be done. And of course, different levels of government has the different rules you need to follow. Again, with the Texas legislature, it has its county line rules where if you can draw a district wholly contained in a county, you should. If not, then you get some room to be able to pull in from other parts and have those conversations as well. And we talked about some of the principles you need to follow as well when you're doing redistricting. So, yeah, we can talk about this a lot. And I'm always happy to do that. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. Again, my name is Giannis Banks. I am the Texas NAACP Young Adult Chair. I've had many years involved with redistricting. I mean, I drew maps for the Texas NAACP in 2011. I drew some more back in 2021. And so I've been doing this for a little while, I guess about 12 years now, but have had a lot of experience doing it and some training. So always happy to talk and help you out as much as I can. Thank you for your time.